So today, one of my subscribers asked a really good question, and I love when our subscribers ask really good questions because it makes me have to like look at myself and like ask myself, wow, how did I get here? Or how did these things happen? Because sometimes stuff just happens so fast that I never really get the chance to actually sit down and think about what happened or process how it happened or where I've been through and where I'm going. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I just like life just happens and I just keep moving forward. But this question, it just brought me back to a part in time where life was really different, where my relationship with myself was really different. My relationship with my partner was different. And although this question is just asking about me and heaven, like my relationship with my family was different. My relationship with my friends was different. Like it just brought me back to this point in time where life, I would say, didn't necessarily look the best for me. So I really appreciate when we get asked, like, I don't even want to say high level questions, but when we get asked like questions with meaning and like feeling behind them. Essentially what they said was, I'm gonna read their question and then I'm gonna read my response to their question. But pretty much what I really want to do is just go into a little more detail about this question because it was just on my heart. So they said, good day. The first question is for Peasy. As a man, was it difficult for you to open up or be vulnerable with heaven at any point in your relationship? If so, how did you overcome it? And I don't even have to read my response. I'll just go into it. There absolutely was a time where me being vulnerable was difficult in my relationship. It wasn't that it was just difficult for me to open up with heaven. It was difficult for me to open up with myself. It was difficult for me to be vulnerable with myself. So 5 years ago, the person that I was completely in a shell. Wow, it's crazy. I didn't like doing anything. I always said I hated people. You know, I was in my shell. I was in my bubble. I wasn't vulnerable with anybody. I wasn't even vulnerable. I wasn't vulnerable with myself, and I didn't allow myself to feel anything. So during that time, I haven't cried. During that time, so like 2020, I didn't cry. You know, I think it was like 5 or 6 years since the last time I had cried. At that time, I didn't really know how I was feeling. So like I was coping with so many different ways to try to feel something, when in actuality I should have been, you know, tending to myself. But that was a necessary period of time for me in order for me to evolve and grow into the person that I am today, right? But vulnerability was not a thing that existed in my life at that time. And it took for me to be with heaven and for her to tell me, like, you know, you're not emotional with me, or you're not open with me. And I had to really look at myself and ask myself, like, what do you mean? Like, I'm telling you everything, you know, in my head, I'm telling you everything. I'm telling you how I feel, and I'm telling you, you know, this is what I'm feeling, and I'm being open and I'm being vulnerable. But it was so surface level. You know how you ask somebody, how are you doing today? And you say good. That was where I was at that point. I wasn't really giving her anything to feed off of. I wasn't really giving her the time to try to understand who I was. So it was difficult at that time. It was a really interesting time in our relationship because she was giving me the space to be open and honest and vulnerable. But I wasn't receiving it because I never knew what it meant. So I was never around people who were vulnerable. Like, let's just say my family, right? Anytime that, looking back, right, anytime that I wanted to be open and honest and vulnerable about something, I was either, I pretty much got in trouble for it, or I got ignored, or it was as if whatever I was feeling didn't matter. And all of those things carried over into my adulthood. In my adulthood, the friends that I have around me or the people that I have around me, you know, we're not really having deep conversations. We aren't really talking about how we feel. You know, we niggas like this what we do. We not sitting in the house. We finna smoke some weed and we finna go find some, you know, like these things aren't even crossing my head. So in my relationship, those things didn't even exist because I didn't know what they were, and I didn't even know how to express them, especially, like I said, because there was nothing around me showing me, hey, this is how you be vulnerable, and X, Y, and Z. These are things that I just learned over time, but she's telling me these things and I'm trying to figure out what she means. And then as we're talking and we're getting deeper into the communication part, you know, I'm starting to understand. So I said all that to say, I was pretty much cutting off a piece of myself. I was hiding a piece of myself. Because being vulnerable is hard, and in order to be vulnerable, you have to trust the person that you're being vulnerable with. And I had to realize, oh, I don't trust myself. And I had to realize I'm not being honest with myself. And then I had to take another step back and be like, and ask myself, do I really love myself? And all of those things kind of hit like a truck, because I was cutting all of those things off from myself, let alone the world. But first, I was cutting it off from me. And in order for me to learn what vulnerability meant, I had to love myself a little different. I had to stop doing certain things. I had to stop having certain habits. I had to change up my friend group. You know, I had to really isolate myself from the world in order to see who I was or what I was feeling. I had to let go of all of these different habits that I had, that I was using to feel something, so I could actually feel something myself. So I had to slow down on smoking weed, or stop smoking weed. I didn't officially stop at the time, I won't lie, but I slowed down a lot. I had to stop drinking. I had to stop doing things that I didn't want to do just because it was giving me the feeling of that I'm okay, instead of actually feeling okay, you know? So I had to basically get back in touch with my body. And the more that I was connecting with myself, the more I realized like how deep not loving myself was putting me into a hole. I realized how deep, you know, not being vulnerable and open was further pushing me away from myself. And so with those realizations, it just it was showing me how much I was hiding myself from her at the same time. And because I was hiding myself from her, because I was hiding myself from myself, and I was hiding myself from her, that also meant that I was hiding myself from my family. You know, that just meant I was putting on a facade of who I was. I wasn't really being honest. And so that took a lot of work to actually figure out. It took a lot of conversations, and now I'm so grateful for her because we literally sit down and we talk all day. We literally talk about everything, and we're having these conversations, and we're getting deeper and deeper into ourselves. This is when I started going to the gym a little more. This is when I finally started quitting my jobs. This is when I stopped selling weed. And then it was almost to a point where I stopped smoking. But this is when I really started to find myself. I don't know if these things are connected, but at the same time of me not being vulnerable and me not being honest was on that same note, I was also like not happy with life. I guess I can see how they are connected. But at the same time that I don't know who I am, it's the same time I'm working jobs that I don't want to work. On the same hand, I'm like, I'm not being completely honest with myself. So yeah, I will say that they are connected. Like that part of my life, it didn't feel good. And maybe this is just me, like, cause everybody have their own experience. The further disconnected I was away from my, I don't know, humanity, or the further I was disconnected away from my emotions, was equally equivalent to how disconnected I was from like reality and how the world worked. It took me to actually sit down and analyze myself. It took me to actually learn what love is. And it took me to learn how to love myself properly. I started reading more, I started getting more information, I started gathering more knowledge, and I started to do some inner work. That work looked like me keeping my hair cut. I don't have a haircut right now because it's kind of hard to find a barber here, but that's besides the point. It took me going to the gym. It took me, like actually loving myself instead of smoking weed all day and drinking all day. Now I'm working out, and now I'm drinking ginger shots every day, and now I'm drinking ginger and BT every day, and now I'm becoming more open and honest about how I feel slowly, because it wasn't something that happened overnight. I wasn't able to like immediately after be like, hey babe, this is how I feel. You know what I mean? It still took some time. All of those things took time. It took me months. It took time for me to start getting out of that shell, but it also took that time for me to start changing the way that I was treating myself, if that makes sense. Because the better I was treating myself, the more confident I felt in actually saying how I felt. The more confident I felt in my decisions and my ability to make decisions. The more confident I felt in saying, hey, you know what, I don't like this. Or saying, hey, you know what, this doesn't feel good. When I wasn't being vulnerable, I wasn't even like making decisions for myself. I was literally letting everything around me dictate how I felt, and I was letting everything around me dictate what I decided to do. I wasn't being completely me. So yeah, it took work every single day to get to the point where I can be completely open and honest and vulnerable with her. And I don't even think I'm 100% there yet, because I don't think you're like never done doing the work. Because there are so many more ways that I can be vulnerable with her that I'm still holding on to. So my favorite form of inner work is called the pursuit of why. And this is probably one of the most profound things that I have came across in life, to be honest. And so basically how it works is it starts with a question. And basically she asked me this question, and you can ask yourself it, or you can hear it, and then you can just start digging deep on it. And so in a sense, I was basically asked, why aren't you vulnerable? Or you can ask yourself, am I vulnerable? If you say no, the next question is why? Why aren't you vulnerable? And then you want to answer that question. And I typically use the thing that first comes to my brain. So, am I vulnerable? No. Well, why am I not vulnerable? Because my whole life, and I wrote it down too. I said, why aren't I vulnerable? Well, because I never had a space to be vulnerable. Because the people around me never gave me the opportunity to be vulnerable. And then you say, why? Why haven't the people around you given you the space to be vulnerable? And then you answer that question. My parents didn't understand me, and I don't think that my parents had the opportunity to be vulnerable because they are just like their parents. And then it starts to get deeper. And then I started to realize that the people that I was being vulnerable to never had the space to be vulnerable. So when vulnerability shows up around them, they kind of fight it. And it helped me give my parents more grace for how I was raised. And it also gave me the opportunity to basically rewrite history or rewrite my own story. And now I know why I wasn't being vulnerable. And I mean, obviously it's more reasons to it than just the people around me weren't vulnerable. I'm pretty sure there was something else there, but that allowed me, that freed up so much clarity. Just because I keep asking why, and I need to figure out why are these things happening, why am I acting this way? And I keep asking why, without judgment. I'm not looking to find enemies. I'm not looking to find like people to despise. I'm looking to see why me as a person is having a hard time with vulnerability. I hope I told that story right. My brain is trying to make me overthink, and I don't want to overthink. And I don't want to tell the story again. But essentially, my favorite form of inner work is the pursuit of why. And essentially what it is you ask a question and then you ask why. You answer the question and then you ask why. You answer the question and then you ask why. You answer the question and then you ask why. You keep doing that until you get to the root of what's really wrong. And you don't do it to look for enemies or anything like that. You do it to see why are you the way that you are. Not why anybody else is the way that they are, but why are you? Why did these things happen to you this way? Why did these things shape you this way? And then that just gives you room to grow from there. But yeah, pretty much that was the topic that was brought to me today. And I'm really grateful for when people can ask me those questions. But essentially that is how I worked up the courage to be vulnerable with my partner.